And Michael Harper is a Country Fire Authority volunteer firefighter in Alexandra, where he's been fighting the blaze and also lost his own home of 10 years. And he joins us now. Michael, welcome, and sorry about everything that you've been through over the last several days. As a volunteer firefighter, you're part of that overall emergency effort to save lives and property. And yet, very sad news this afternoon that someone has died in that Longwood area, huh?
Yeah, that's really sad. We were up in that Go Bar Road area on, I think, Thursday night, early Friday morning, and that's really disappointing to hear that somebody's passed.
Yeah. So when did you start fighting this fire? Was that on the Friday, that horror day, or you've just mentioned you were actually started on it the day before?
Yeah, I got a really urgent call to join a strike team at 6 p.m. on the Thursday evening, and we were sort of a little bit thin with numbers for strike teams, so we headed up into the highlands to Terrup. It was our first assignment, and we did about 26 hours and finished up here in Alexandra, protecting the town of Alexandra.
So give us an insight into those 26 hours. How intense did it get for you during those battles to save home? Were you kind of going from home to home or trying to set up breaks, or how were you operating?
We had a strike team leader. We had a crew of 4. So our local mayor was actually our crew leader and I was the driver. And yeah, we were just given, task after task to go and protect homes. Sometimes you would go onto a job and the fire would already be approaching the house, and we knew that just one truck and one crew might not be enough. And we were just moved on to job non-stop up the top of the highlands. And then we came, as it came down and tried to cross the Maroondah Highway, there was about 10 trucks and a whole lot of slip-ons trying to protect it, jumping over the Maroondah Highway. But, we fought tirelessly for a good 4 hours and held it at bay, had some air assistance, but unfortunately it jumped the highway, and once it jumped the highway, we knew that Alexandra was going to be in the line.
And how intense were conditions there in terms of the fire racing towards you?
Extreme, yeah. Some conditions, we're driving through paddocks that are actually on fire. Quite often when the fire was going to jump Maroondah Highway, we would have a wall of fire on one side that we were trying to keep at bay, and at the same time it was spotting on the other side of the freeway, so the highway. So, sometimes you're literally in the middle of the fire. You've got it on both sides, and the windows are extremely hot for us inside the cabin. But then we've got guys on the back of the truck who are actually spraying the fire, and they had extreme conditions. The heat and the smoke and everything that they were dealing with was extreme, and I'd take my hat off to the guys that work on the back of the truck. That was just extraordinary for them to go for that period of time and just kept fighting away. And it was, I take my hat off to those guys.
Did it ever get to the stage where you thought you might not make it in those conditions?
I suppose we had a couple of hairy moments when you've got to retreat. And, one stage we went over a hill and there was a 6-foot fire just coming through a paddock and really high grass, and we all knew we literally had 30 seconds to turn around and get the truck out of there. Otherwise, we were going to be in a burnover situation. But we're all trained for burnovers and we know exactly what to do. And coming into the fire season, we have to make sure that we're all qualified in a burnover tactic. So, yeah, we were probably pretty close to having a burnover on a couple of occasions.
And was the fire kind of burning consistently in one direction, or was it incredibly variable in terms of where it was coming from?
It was a bit more predictable up in the highlands. It was going to the north. So we always knew it was heading northwards. And so we were trying to cut it off at the head. But it was moving around a lot as well. Once we started getting wind gusts coming back on itself, it helps when you get a wind gust and it blows back on itself, because the fire goes into the back and drops out. But it was swirling around a lot. But I suppose up there it was a bit more predictable. But once it got down into the flatland, it started splitting off in quite a few areas, and we had a couple of different fronts that we were fighting.
And so were you on the road with this from like about 7 p.m. on the Thursday night through to 9 p.m. on the Friday night?
Correct, yeah. I think we had probably an hour's break once we realised, once the fire had jumped the highway, we went into full asset protection of the town of Alexandra. So I think we had 20 trucks here and a good 10 slip-ons. We all reconvened back at the station, had a little bit of bite to eat and a quick rest and lie down for half an hour, and then we were debriefed on what the task was to try and protect the town. And then there was a strategy put in place to protect the town, and that worked really well. I mean, mine was the only house that we lost in Alexandra, ironically, but we didn't lose another house in the town, and that was quite incredible because you can see from aerial that the fire literally went right round both sides, and we managed to cut it off at the head, which was incredible.
Yeah, you can see from the Vic emergency map, they have this blackened out area where the fire is, and you can see that there's this wedge for the town of Alexandra there. So it must have been that story of saving that town from this fire must be incredible. Just talk us through what the strategy was and how that became so effective.
The strategy was for the trucks to spread themselves throughout that north facing where it was coming northerly in to hit the town. There was also lines up in the hills, so basically it drops down really quickly from these hills into our town at the football ground area, and they'd cut mineral lines in up there to sort of slow it down. I think the slip-ons were working really hard on knocking down any spot fires up in that area, and by doing that it literally pushed the fire on the outskirts of town to both the east and west. And then we were getting a lot of spot fires around the speedway and then out the other side at Wanwagaran Road, but then the idea was for those crews to quickly rush out there and put them out and just keep pushing the fire sidewards, or letting it go sidewards rather than letting it come into the town. It was an amazing strategy, an amazing job done by the Alexandra CFA and the supporting crews that, I come from Akron, so they had a fair bit of support as well.
Yeah, what was it like being part of that team in that situation and feeling like you were doing something that was going to be so profound in terms of saving that community?
Well, it's special when it's your own community. I mean, we've been out on strike teams before up at Corrion and different strike teams when you're fighting, in different areas and helping out. But when it's in your own town and you're protecting your own town, it's really different. And there is a real sense of, I suppose, relief, firstly, that, nobody really, suffered any major damage. We didn't have any injuries and, bar ourselves, the town's safe, and I think everybody's incredibly appreciative. We're a small, tight-knit community, and to be able to help out however you can is pretty special.
I heard in one interview that a lot of the community was on the sports ground and kind of like the wagons were circled around the community. Is that kind of what happened?
Yeah, the last point of refuge was Lecky Park. So I think we learned a lot after the 2009 fires. Back then the mentality prior to that was fight or flight, and I think now people understand that it's just not worth losing a life. You can lose assets, we can replace assets, but we can't replace life. So there was a huge change in mentality of people leaving town and going back to Melbourne or getting to other towns where they were safer. And there was a lot of people that took that advice to go to Lecky Park early and sat there for literally a really long time. I think they started going there at 9 o'clock in the morning, and they were still there until it was safe and blew past, I think, sort of into the night. So, congratulations to all those people for heeding the advice of the CFA and UGFM broadcasters for encouraging people to go there and be safe. It certainly made our job a lot easier knowing that, when we had assets to protect, that there probably wasn't people in the houses.
Yeah. And talking about assets to protect, when did you find out that your home was lost?
One of our driver, who's our mayor of the town, our team leader, I was driving, who was a team leader, he's the mayor. He got a call that his house had burnt down, and he's at the top of a hill outside of town. So we decided to take the truck up there and have a bit of a look. We got up to his place and there was fire on both sides of the road, and our team had to make a decision as to whether we pushed through that fire to try and see if we could do anything for his house. And luckily enough, we did push through the fire, and his house was there standing and completely intact. So it was a real relief, because it's strange being on the truck knowing that one of your members on the truck has probably lost their house, and it's really emotional. And then there was adulation and joy that, we hadn't lost the property. And then next thing you know, we're driving back to town, and I heard over the radio, my property address came over the radio, and they said that they wouldn't allow any more trucks onto the property and to retreat due to the fact of gas bottles exploding, and that at that stage they'd lost the assets. And yeah, the guys in the truck turned around and said, "What number's your place?" And I said, "Yeah, that's my place." So we drove around there, and yeah, the scene was pretty horrific. But take my hat off to the people that tried saving the house on our behalf.
And so what time, do you have any idea what time of day or night that was? Like, were you in the middle of that 24 hours, 26 hours of working at that stage?
Yeah, I was probably about 19 hours in. And, I think an ember had got into the grass next to the house in a paddock. And we had a timber home in a valley where the wind really whipped up the valley. So by the time that ember hit our house, by the time it was completely gone, I would have said it would probably have only been 30 minutes. So it was pretty late on. And, we went back to the station after that. And, had a cold drink, and we were really thin on numbers for our strike team. So our crew decided to go back out, and I decided at that stage that I didn't know if I had the capacity to go back out. I was a bit fatigued and mentally and physically. But once those guys jumped in the truck and they were looking for another driver, I just thought, no, I need to be back on this truck. So I jumped back on the truck and went out and did another task as well with our crew.
So what was that like for you at that moment, knowing your place was gone, but getting back out there and continuing the fight?
I don't know. I think that's just what you sign up for. When you're a volunteer and that's your crew, and you've been fighting with your crew all day, and we'd achieved some great results. We had an amazing crew that day. We were just so proactive, and we attacked so many fires and saved a lot of properties. And I don't know. I don't think it was a time to think about my house. It was a time to just keep actioning what our duty was and what we needed to do. And once we got out there to another property that we were setting up protection around, I sort of sat down waiting to the fire to approach and had a bit of a think about what had happened. But I couldn't change it. We need to play on, and we go to fires where people lose houses. And this time it was my turn.
And so, where are you now?
At a little house in our community, somebody within our town's got an Airbnb that they've given to us to come in, and it's nice not having to sort of stay with somebody. And Kath and I have our own space, and we've got a lovely little place that we're staying in, which is still in town, so we're nice and close to our community.
Yeah, great. And so have you got any idea, like you've been doing so much work over the last several days, you must be exhausted from all of that, but now you're confronted with kind of getting back on your feet. Does it look like your insurance is good, or like have you turned your mind towards kind of the next steps forward for you?
No, I haven't been back out in the fire field the last day and a half. I didn't have any socks. I didn't have a T-shirt. So I literally walked out of the door at home, threw my fire gear on because I was needed quite quickly, and went out the door with my fire clothes on, and that was it. So I lost everything else. So yesterday we went back to Melbourne, loud through the blockades, went back and got some clothes and some essentials, and now we've returned to Alexandra. It's cooled down a bit. We've got a lot of good strike teams up here at the moment, so I think I'm going to get a bit of a reprieve for the next couple of days while it's still cool. But there's some really hot weather again and winds, and I don't think it looks great for the back half of this week, to be honest with you. I think there's chances of it rolling back in, so I've volunteered to get back into strike teams later in the week.
Yeah, so your attention is still on fighting those fires, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. We'll work through this day by day. We need to, go back through our insurance and see what we can do. We've now got a place to stay, which is safe. If I go out on the fires, my wife, Kath, who's also a volunteer, if she's not volunteering at the same space, I'm really comfortable that she's in town and safe. And, we'll just see how it pans out over the next week, and hopefully it doesn't come back into our district as fierce as it was last week.
Yeah. Well, your attitude and spirit's amazing, Michael. And I tip my hat to you. And it's just, it's great to talk to you, just to hear about your your courage through all of this, and the way you've approached this, and the way you've helped the town, and the way that Alexandra was saved. And yeah, sorry again for what's happened to you, and good luck with everything that you've got to face now.
Thank you. And hats off to all our volunteers at CFA, DELP, forestry, everybody that's all been working together. You know, I think everybody's worked in really well together, and I'm grateful for the people that tried to save our house, and grateful for everybody that volunteers in this state and does their best.
Good on you, Michael. Michael Harper there in Alexandra, the town he helped save.
Thanks, mate.